Heartland Song Network is a not-for-profit working here based in Kansas City, although we work through the five-state Heartland region. And our main goal is to create a sustainable environment for artists in the Heartland. So part of that is bringing industry experts to our musicians, listening to our musicians, asking them what they need more of here in the Midwest. And one of the answers has been need more industry professionals. So we thought we'd bring a couple in today. We have Jeff Freling and Amos Cochran are our speakers today, and they have a lot of great information to offer to you. So
Yeah, hey everybody. This is so cool, like I said, to kind of get to just meet up randomly in the middle of the day from people all over the place. Like I have a few friends that have jumped on, I know from DC area and Fayetteville and France. That's cool. So thanks for coming to hang out and being sort of interested in this topic. Jeff and I've talked for a few years now about how sort of odd it is to live in the middle of the United States and do film scoring work. I think I've been scoring films for quite a long time. So it's normal for me, but it is kind of a strange thing that we've been able to accomplish this a bit. So mainly thanks to Erin for inviting me and Jeff and to the network for having me on. This is really cool. So I'm going to give a little bit of an intro about myself and then share some clips of my work, and then Jeff's going to do the same thing, and then it'll roll from there. And again, put any questions in the chat. Erin's going to do an awesome job of monitoring those. So again, my name is Amos Cochran. I've been scoring films since about 2011 is when I started. And a lot of times I sort of start there and then move on, but I know a lot of us are musicians here. And so I feel like I should take it back a little bit. And like I grew up playing bass when I was in sixth grade. I started playing bass in bands, and that's what I wanted to do. That was the idea. That was my main thing for many, many years. And then I had a life shift happen where when you want to play in bands, you're not at home, are you? And you're out till 3 in the morning. And when my daughter was born, I didn't want to do that anymore. It's like I'd worked really hard to get to this point, and I was like, well, this isn't really what my life is calling for anymore. But I kind of just had the thought, I was like, well, what if like, what could I do from home and still do music? And it was sort of as simple as, well, maybe I could write music. I hadn't really written music at that point. The bands I had played in was primarily just played bass and made those parts up, but I wasn't the primary writer. So I got one of those little MacBooks, remember like the white MacBooks that crack on the edges? Does anybody have one of those? Like they just fell apart on the edges. It was a pretty sad design, but it's what got me started in all of this. And I just started making music. I made a lot of stuff in GarageBand, a lot of really bad stuff, but I was giving it to everybody. I made a little CD. Remember CDs? Those were fun. And I made a CD and just was handing it out to everybody and trying to find any opportunity I could to write music for things. And so that kind of led to some friends saying, oh, we have a friend who made this film. You should talk to him. And so I literally cold call this fellow named Daniel and said, hey, I'm writing music for films. I really wasn't. I just lied. There's a lot of lying that goes on when you figure out how to do a new thing. It's good lying. It's the encouraged kind of truth fabrication. And so I called him and I said, hey man, I'd love to score your film. And he said, can you do 40s jazz? And I was like, oh, absolutely. So more lying started to happen. And I said, yeah, of course I can do 40s jazz. And he said, great, let me send you a cut of the film and we'll go from there. So I hung up the phone and was like, okay, cool. I have a film scoring gig and I have no idea how to do this. But this is what I want to do. Like, I like this. I can work from home and let's see how this goes. So that worked really well, actually. And we ended up winning the Little Rock Film Festival that year. And then it was just one of those things. I started to meet people. I started to network. And just really, I think we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, but I found every opportunity I could to put myself in a place where people needed the thing I wanted to do. And that's kind of how it's evolved from here. And at this point, I mean, again, I've done this now for like over 10 years. I've been out to Sundance. I've had films that have played in all kinds of different things. Got nominated for a Mid-American Emmy Award for some things. And this is one of the main parts of my portfolio career, as I have learned to refer to it as. And I love it. I mean, I do a lot of different things to survive. Thankfully, it's all artistic things. But for me at this point, film scoring has kind of become the main thing. And a lot of it has to do with just the time I've spent cultivating relationships with friends, and how networks have grown And at this point, I sort of have the general philosophy of, I wait until a friend of a friend recommends me, and then I know those are going to be cool people. So, I think there's the typical thing of I didn't necessarily set out to do this. I wanted to play bass, but now I don't play bass at all anymore. I now haven't played my bass in years. But I really love what I do. It's interesting. And it's fun. And we'll get it. That's kind of a quick intro. I'm going to screen share and show you guys two different clips of some different things. I picked a newer thing. The first thing we're going to watch is the intro for this new PBS show called Mystery League that I scored last summer. And then we're going to look at a bit of an older piece from a film I did called Animal. And I picked these two because they're very contrasting things. And I think when it comes to film scoring, and we'll talk about this a bit more later, but you never know what you're going to need to be able to do. We have our things and we have our realms that we're good at, but sometimes it's the kids' show and sometimes it's the weird experimental short film. So let's take a look at these two things, and then I'll hand it over to Jeff. All right. Can we all see this? Yes? Okay, cool. Oh, did I sound share? Let's see. Hold on. Can we hear that too? Okay, great. All right, I ruined the whole thing. Just kidding. Here we go. So this is the intro to Mystery League that's now playing right now on Arkansas PBS. Okay, cool. That one's fun. I like that. That was a fun month of my life, working on that project. I wrote more than that piece in the month, but that was the main focus. So this next thing probably is more like this is more Amos at the end of the day. Because I also too, I mean, I should note that I play piano and have a string ensemble that I play with, and I do live shows as well. And this piece is a little more in the realm of Amos and the stuff that Amos really likes the most. But again, sometimes you get a nice budget to score the kids show, and you've got to figure that out too. However, this is the realm that I'm more a fan of. And this is actually a video that I cut together featuring one of my favorite tracks, but you'll get to see some bits of the film and some wordage. Cool. So that's a little look at the film Animal that I scored. I really love that piece. So I don't know. I picked those two because they're quite contrasting things, and I love that actually my days can be spent sometimes working on Mystery League stuff and sometimes working on things like Animal. And it keeps me interested. I think a lot of the times I'm never a fan of the same thing over and over again. So that's a quick little bit and intro about me. Obviously, we'll chat more as we go, but I'd like to hand it over to Jeff. And again, thanks for giving me space to hang out and chat with you guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Amos. That is very cool. Both of those pieces are awesome. I'm going to let's see. Okay. Well, my name is Jeff Freling, and I've been a musician for most of my life. My main instrument is guitar. A lot of you who I see in the chat probably know me from Victor and Penny, which is the duo that Erin and I had together, still have together. So we toured. It's kind of like Amos was saying, when you're a live musician, you spend a lot of your time away from home, and we did that for 10 years, and it was fun. And then the really what sort of changed for me is when the pandemic came along in 2020 and made it necessary kind of for everyone in our business to pivot, you know. And one of the great things that I was able to do during that time was uh, take an online course from Berklee School of Music, which is one of the great music schools here in this country, um, for composing for film and TV. And it was a certificate. It was, gosh, it was like about a year and a half, about 18 months, 5 different courses. And I learned a ton, and it was exciting. And when I was done, I didn't want it to stop. I wanted to learn more, because you can always learn more. And I think we're going to get in, we'll get into a little bit of some of those specifics that I learned, and I know that Amos knows too, about when you're scoring for a moving picture, you're really not part of the music industry anymore. You're part of the film and TV industry, and it really is a completely different animal. We're so used to, as musicians, like, you know, we're going to write what's important to us, and we're going to tell our stories, and we're going to show the world what we can do. And when you're scoring for film and TV, you're not doing that. You're telling someone else's story. And the most important thing you can do is leave your ego at the door and talk to your director, producer, whoever it is, and ask them how you can best tell their story, and just be open to everything. That's one of the greatest things that I've learned from this whole process of learning how to write music for a moving picture, basically. And there's a lot of different avenues and ways you can do it, and we'll get into some of that. The thing that I'm going to show you is, it's the opening sequence from a full-length film that I just scored. And to Amos's point earlier, this came directly from a friend of a friend. For a lot of you here in KC, you probably know there's a really robust film community here in Kansas City. And I've been fortunate enough to have Erin on my side, and she's been an actor, and she knows a lot of the film people, and that was kind of my in, really. But again, it all boils down to relationships, as Amos was saying, and I think he's going to speak a little more specifically about that. But this film came to me from a director who asked another director who I had done something for, and we made this film, and it took a really long time, and it was really fun. But now the end result is, the director has he's done a ton of work in getting it out there. It's been picked up by Amazon, and it's been picked up for distribution in Japan. So in March, it's literally going to be showing on the big screen in 3 major cities in Japan. So what we do here is we cross our fingers for some what they call back end money, the royalties, and we're gonna get into that too. So anyway, I'm going to screen share here and show you the opening sequence from Kick Me. All right, everybody see that? Give me a thumbs up on the audio too. It hasn't started yet. Okay. All right. So that's the intro to Kick Me. And as you can imagine, that the whole film is kind of a wild ride. Um, One thing I think is cool about that piece of music is the thing that's really going to stick with you. I mean, I think a lot of film and TV composition is as much about arrangement as it is about composition, and specifically that piece. The thing that's going to stick with you from that is that bam 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 bam. Right? I didn't write that. Gary did, the director. He came to me with this opening. He's like, I've got this. You know, I've got this little thing that goes. It goes. He's like, what can we do with that? You know, so several weeks later, I came up with that. So that becomes a really important collaboration in this, you know, and I thought that was important enough, and that little theme appears enough in that movie that on the cue sheet that we sent to Amazon and we sent to the Japanese distributor and everything, he's listed as 50% composer on any piece that has that in it. It's that important to it, and I'm happy to do that. It's, you know, made my job easier having a starting point like that, you know. And then the only other thing I wanted to say about that before we move on is, and we'll talk about this in when we talk about some of the gear, like that is 100% sampled instruments in there, and just to show that you can literally do this like in a laptop. I love that Amos is able to make really cool stuff with live music, and he's got a great setup in his home, in his studio, where he can record live musicians, and that is super important if you can get that element into your scores and things like that. But that piece was all sampled instruments, and we'll talk about a little bit of that later. So
You know, Jeff, like one thing I'd say is when I first started to do things, it was all samples for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And then I just got tired. Like the first time I had a real player, I was like, oh, I'm never going back if I can.
Yeah.
So, anyway, yeah. I think we all learn how to work the way that we want to. But yes, like it's pretty amazing what is out there on certain levels.
Yeah.
For bigger sounds, we can talk about that more.
Yeah. Yeah. Erin, should we move on? And what's next?
Did you have a second piece to show, or just the one?
No, just the one. Yeah, just the one. Yeah.
Great. Well, then I say let's go on. So there's been, thanks everybody for putting the comments, and I can tell that we've got musicians in the room because they're like, I love the suspense here, and I love the, the bass over the chord padding and stuff. So it's nice to know we're speaking the same language here. So if you guys have specific questions, the guys are going to go and talk about a few specific things like gear and clients, relationships, library music versus composition for hire. Going to get into some nuts and bolts here. If you guys think of questions as you're coming along, if you would go ahead and put them in the chat, I'll monitor those and find a time to ask the guys so that they can answer those. And then I think at the end, if we have time, we'll open up the floor and see if we want to talk about some things. But I'll turn it back to you guys. Let's just dig on into the guts of it.
Well, since we were just chatting about this a little bit, I really wanted to kind of show you guys specifically my process and how a piece is created. This this is just a little piece I did for when I first started learning this stuff. I tried to participate in as many film scoring competitions as I could. And so this piece here is from a film that was for the Zurich Film Fest. I think this was in 2021. And the grand prize was 10,000 euros and a trip to Zurich. Unfortunately, I entered it 3 times and never won. But so this is my main workspace, and this is Logic Pro. This is the basically the recording thing that I use. There are many different what they call DAWs, and it's digital audio workspace. Logic is pretty prevalent. There's also Pro Tools. A lot of you have probably heard of Pro Tools. There's a bunch of others. Logic is really, I think, user-friendly, and for a lot of you Mac users, it's just a $200 upgrade from GarageBand. And I also know a lot of people who have scored stuff with GarageBand. But this just has a lot more there's a lot more you can do with this. And as you can see, so down here at the bottom, we've got, this is basically the equivalent of my mixing console. And then I'm going to open this up. This is our video, which is dropped in. This is basically the closing credits of this film. So I'll just play a little bit of this. You can hear. So that's fun because it's a short little piece. But I want to break this down a little bit and talk about what's going on. So these are, like I said, these are all sampled instruments, and what I'm gonna do is solo out the string instruments. And let's see, let me open these up a little bit so you can see how these are all sort of inputted. And then here's what just the strings sound like by themselves. So for people with really good ears, you can tell those are not real players. And if I had a budget, I would probably put real players on top of that. That's one thing a lot of people do, is they'll take samples as your bass, and you can put some real, like, even if I just had a violin player that could come in and put something on top of that, it would make it more realistic. But the way you mix it all together really helps. And so what these instruments are, they're from a company called, and you can have a look here at this. Like this is how this was inputted in here. This just the. Sorry.
Jeff, can you open up a contact player? Like open up the contact player on the basses, just so they can sort of see.
Yes, exactly.
What that looks like. There we go.
Yeah. So this is the contact player, and then these instruments load within this. So this right here is our basses. Let's see if we can I can play these. Maybe not. Anyway, these are just the basses, and there you can hear them there. I mean, it's a pretty convincing, nice sound. These are all really nicely recorded. Now, this library is from a company called Spitfire Audio. And I'm going to send you a link to them. It's spitfireaudio.com. They have a huge library of sampled instruments. And they also have a section of their website called Labs, and it's all free stuff. And even their free stuff sounds pretty good. The main difference is with the free stuff, you don't get as much, like I can control so much of the articulation and everything like that with these sounds that cost a little more. But the free stuff is really, really good too. But, this is all also part of sort of learning the arranging as well. When you put it all together and make it sound more realistic. Like you can, like up here, like we can solo out. My favorite is always the woodwinds, and I love these sounds. I like these guys. This is all stuff I learned at school, arranging, like how to arrange for orchestra. And like I always say, like one of the most humbling things about taking those classes was, I've been a musician all my life and like feeling like, oh, I know everything about music. And I got into this world of orchestral music and arranging, and I just felt like an idiot, but it was so humbling and so energizing to like learn how to do all this. And you can really, in this realm inside of Logic with these sampled instruments, and Spitfire Audio isn't the only company that makes them. You can do a lot of research on this. You can learn so much just trial by error, and I would recommend, looking at Spitfire Audio and their lab section with the free stuff and seeing what you can do there. But these are the tools, and it allows you to drop video right in here. So if you can see up at the top, this is the audio for the video. The video is in there. I can open it or close it. So this is how you do it. And you've got your time up at the top, and you can control tempo and everything. I could talk for hours about Logic, but in the limited amount of time we have, I just wanted to briefly go over this. And is there anything else, Amos, you think is important here, or should we?
I think a lot of times people will ask the question, and I don't know if it's been asked, but like, how do you sync it to picture? I mean, we're seeing here that the program does it, but also see like in measure 188, it's 5/4. Is that because of you needed a change on a certain edit?
Yeah, it is, exactly.
Yeah, so like a lot of times, and this is why one of the fun things I think about, and I have a lot of different concepts about the way I go about scoring films. Sometimes it's to picture, sometimes it's away from picture. Like we can talk about that if you'd like later. But what the cool thing about scoring to picture is it makes you write music you would never write otherwise. Like you wouldn't randomly put a 5/4 bar at the beginning of this thing, probably, if the music was playing out. And a lot of times to hit edits, it's like, okay, the tempo works and it hits on that edit, but like it hits on 3. And so then all of a sudden you have a measure of 3, and you would never have that if you were just writing just random music. I mean, you might, but it's neat how the film and the picture, I had a music supervisor one time say, the picture is king, whether you're writing to it or away from it or whatever. And to your point about, losing our egos and all of those things, like the picture is king. And so it's neat how the picture can tell you with edits, if you get the tempo you're feeling, and you'll end up coming up with motifs that are sort of strange and weird because the film like told you it needed to do that.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, it really becomes a collaborator. And I think that's kind of what's neat about it.
Yeah.
So I was going to say that. And then one thing I was going to ask you, okay, do you know about track stacks?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Because you can like you can make your workflow a lot.
Yeah. This is
everything at once. I just wanted to make sure because track stacks like changed my life.
Oh yeah, it's great. So what yeah. Amos is referring to is like I can literally take my strings like this, and then go down, create track stack. It's called something stack, create. So then up here, boom, I call that strings. And now, so I can control the strings.
You can close it. You know what I mean?
You can like so you can close that. So now
you can just make it so much nicer.
Yeah, it's all really clean, and you can do that with anything you want. You can combine them all together. It just makes it visually much easier too, and then you can mix them separately as well. I thought that was a great point though, Amos. I think that's one of the cool things about writing to picture is how the picture is going to tell you what it needs. Like every good film composer will tell you that the picture tells you what it needs. And what I learned to start with is tempo. So a lot of times you're going to get what's called picture lock. So this picture is fully edited, and the editor of that picture might have edited to a piece of music that he had in mind, or he or she had in mind, and it's going to have a tempo to it, and it's going to be sort of implied. I mean, there's still some, fuzzy space here, but you're going to I decided on the tempo first for this, which was 100. And that was, I wanted to hit right there. 2, 3, 4, 5, boom. So it's just that bar of 5 felt necessary there for me to, to hit a certain point with that little triangle, and then the piece coming in. And it's just, I think it's a cool way to think about it, where you start with tempo instead of music. So
right. And then when an editor's like, oh, we changed the edit in the middle of the piece, then you hate them because everything you've done doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And that measure of 3 needs to be a measure of 7. And
yeah.
So on and so forth.
And you go back and you change it.
You go back and you change it. It's like, all right, cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Erin, is this a good time for if anyone else has any specifics about this, or do you want to move on? Or
Well, we've had some really great questions. So I'm gonna read some of these questions and maybe you guys can decide if you want to both answer them or one of you, whatever.
oh, okay.
But we've had some great questions already. So the first one was from Luke, and he's saying when you're working with live musicians as opposed to the what you've got it going right here, do you
Mhm.
typically hire them as session musicians? So
Uh,
you, and I'm assuming that question also, he didn't exactly say that, but gets to when you hire someone to play on that, they don't have any rights to it, right? You're just
that's
paying
correct.
them. It's work for hire,
Yeah.
right?
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would hire like Erin, like you and I did when we hired Shane and Ben to play. Erin and I did a piece together that had strings, and we hired a couple of live string players, and we just paid them for the session.
Yeah.
So you have to budget all that into what you're charging. You have to figure that into
Yeah.
what
Oh
you're
yeah.
charging people, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Did we get that, Luke? Did I answer that? Did we get that? Okay. And the second one about this is great. How much did you have to learn about home recording before you felt confident to officially call yourself a composer and meet the needs of clients? Like, how much
Yeah.
training was there? And I know, Amos, I loved your fake it till you make it story.
Oh, I have
Oh.
no idea what I'm doing all the time.
Mhm.
Um, I go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say, I had one entire 12-week course about how to specifically navigate through scoring to picture in Logic. That was one of the 5 courses in that certificate that I took. So it did take some time. Yeah, I mean it
How
takes
about
a
you? How about you, Amos?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's more about the relationship you have with the person. I mean, there's somebody that has to say yes, right? Somebody has to say, "Oh, I like that." Um, so having a relationship with that person and understanding how to bounce ideas back and forth, and to some extent, it's like they're going to tell me when it's done. They're going to tell me when they like it, and a lot of times that might be at different phases than when I like it. I mean, there's a lot of times I'll send because like the way that I tend to work is like I usually write a lot of music away from picture to make sure I like it as music, and then I'll bring it to picture, and then I'll make a full mock-up like Jeff's done here, and then from there I'll do all the real parts and we'll go into the studio. And like a lot of times like the directors, they'll be like, oh my gosh, it sounds great. I'm like, yeah, but just wait, like it's going to sound a lot better. Like please continue to give me the budget we need to get these players in the studio because it's going to sound better. So a lot of times they would be happy with the sampled version, but I like have at this point I'm like really adamant about convincing them. It's almost like this constant bit of convincing. It's like let me convince them that the voice memo I made is cool. Let me convince them that the mock-up that I made is where the stuff is going to head. And so again, I don't know, I feel like mixing, like I've mixed, I will always feel like my mixes are the worst, like the weakest link for me. Pretty good at writing, pretty good at playing, pretty good at arranging, but like the overall mix a lot of times, and also too, I'm usually exhausted by the time I get to the mix phase. Honestly, I'm like really tired of listening to it, and I sort of lost perspective. So I sort of need either another mixer, a sound guy, or even the director to just say, "Yeah, we like this. This is good." So I don't think um, there's not one answer to that. It's more about collaboration.
And Amos, what kind of training did you have? So Jeff had talked about the training he received during COVID. What kind of training what is your training background?
Yeah, absolutely nothing. I just did it.
Okay.
I
So
again, I
self-taught?
totally self-taught. Yeah, I mean, I
Okay.
learned again. I got that little white MacBook, and I opened GarageBand and was like, "What does this do? What
Or
does this do?" I really didn't have. I've never had a lot of training. I really can't even read music that well. I can write it because I know what my players need, but um, everything for me has been total trial by error because that's how I like to learn. I like it. I like to mess up. I like it to not work a lot because then you figure out what does work. And I think a lot of times too, early on when you're meeting people, they're probably at more the level that you are, where they're figuring things out too. And so
the
cultivating
filmmaker.
those, yeah,
Yeah.
those kind of relationships, like they're making their early films as well. And it's more, I feel like I learn my training really kind of came from just working on things with people to where there were real stakes of like if I don't get this right, like they're not going to have me on the film. And so that drive to have music by Amos Cochran at the end of the film and score the film to build up my portfolio, that was sort of my training. But it was a very like it was, and that's how I do my whole life. Like that's how I've done everything. Like I'm not a big fan of traditional ways to go about things.
I think that's really cool that you guys have had two such different paths to this. Okay, let's move on because we're already gonna run out of time, I'm sure, but let me keep
Yeah.
moving. So let's see. I had a question about the tech setup when you're working on projects. Do you have multiple screens or one laptop? Like we can't see, Jeff, we can't see what you're looking at, for example, or Amos, tell us what it looks like from your side.
Um, so I literally have an iMac. I used to have two screens, and I would throw the picture up on one screen, and I would use my laptop. Actually, no, my laptop was the screen, was the film, and then the monitor was my a Logic file. But at this point, I just have an iMac. I have a shortcut to like I hit one button and the picture will pop up, and then it will go away. So I've kind of become a one screen person after being two screens for a while.
I can just show you briefly what I have here. This thing will cooperate. So I've got, it might be upside down, but I've got my laptop here, and then this is kind of, I want to get a wider shot. So that down there is, this is hard to look at, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, yeah, this is not working. Anyway, so I've got my laptop. I've got my laptop, then I've got a full 88 key keyboard, MIDI keyboard to have all the sounds. I've got a second screen up above me, which is where I usually move my video, so that all I've got down on the bottom screen is my is Pro Tools and that. And then I think what's really important is I have this MIDI keyboard, which you need to have all the computer on and Logic open to use. And then I have another keyboard over here that's just a Casio if I need to dink around with ideas over here. So it's just live without all of this.
I think one interesting thing I'm hearing you saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that I mean you both have come to it kind of through a different path, and you both have a different tech setup. I heard you say there's no one way, and I think that's kind of what you're both saying, that it can work a lot of different ways. You can use live musicians, you can use sample
Yeah,
libraries. Um,
yeah,
yeah,
Yeah, I
just
mean, my
whatever gets the job done and whatever works for you.
yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
And I think it changes. Like I used to have a bit of a bigger setup. I prefer to have a very minimal setup. I used to have this ridiculous hard drive setup going on. I'm down to just three small drives that are really good drives. And yeah, I don't even I even have a small at this point, Jeff, I only have like a small like 32 key keyboard. Like I don't even use a big keyboard anymore. Unless I need to. I have one I can pull out. But like over
Yeah,
time, I've tried to go as minimal as possible. I feel like when I have too many options, I get a little overwhelmed.
yeah,
And I would assume even sample libraries, like I hate buying sample stuff. I hate like I know what I like and I'm gonna use that. And then that also pushes me to work on projects where I can get real players too. It's almost like if you if you set yourself up a certain way to it's like I don't have these things as an option, then I'll write this certain way. And it's taken me
yeah,
a long time because I used to just have vast sample libraries and I would spend all day listening to sounds and trying to make these decisions.
yeah,
And I also do I hate updating my computer. Like I'm really kind of like I want my setup to sort of work like it did in 2015.
yeah.
However, I did have to update because also I have a MacBook that I go when I'm on the road or I'm traveling. Um, I take with me, and so I kind of have a setup that goes between two of those. Like, and I try. It's pretty seamless at this point, which is really handy.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to keep us moving because we're already less than about 15 minutes left. So we've got a couple of other questions, but I know you had other topics that you wanted to talk about too. Um, one of the questions, two people asked this, so I'll ask this one and then maybe we'll move on to a next topic. But two people asked about recommending classes or tutorials, especially for mixing. Is it
I could,
possible? What I would suggest, why don't we, I'm going to send a follow-up email. How about if I get some suggestions from Jeff and Amos about if there's anything they would recommend, and I can put that in the email and I'll send it to you all? Would that be okay?
Cool.
Okay, so maybe instead of taking time right now, let's just plan on, I'll make myself a note. We'll include that. So classes or tutorials. And then we had a kind of philosophical question about changing your mindset between composing for others and composing for yourself. So maybe we can get into that philosophical question a little bit at the end. And someone also
Um,
asked about favorite film and TV composers, if you have anybody that's really been a mentor or
yeah,
an,
let's do those at the end, especially that philosophical one, because I actually like the more I've written, I think that's incredibly important.
okay,
And I can speak to that. I'm sure Jeff can too. So yeah,
okay.
let's talk like I mean, we would talk about client relations. I think is what we have on the next, and I'm chatting about that a little bit. And you know, it's weird. I mean, client is such a clienty word. I feel like for the film work, you know, if I'm doing a 30-second piece for an air conditioner company, that's definitely a client. I feel like what we're talking about at this point is more, you know, more film, uh, more sort of bigger slash maybe more kind of important pieces that matter more, like projects that matter more. And like I mentioned at the very beginning, I think so much of it comes down to relationships. I mean, I hate that. I think it's so corny to say, you know, your network is your net worth or whatever that is, but it's like so true. You know, the people that you know, though, that's going to be how you learn new things, and that's going to be how you get projects. And I think the best way to meet to find these kind of projects and get things is to go to places where this is happening. If there are film festivals that are in your area, or travel to them and meet where are the like-minded people hanging out. Like if you're wanting to score films, you know, going to the Blues Society Jam is probably not the best place. But if you want to get into the blues, it's a great place to go. So, you know, really sort of staking out, knowing what you want to do, and then finding where that is going on, and go and hang out and say hi and meet people. I mean, I think every gig I have ever gotten is generally from a relationship that I had along the way somewhere else. I mean, very rarely do I get just complete cold calls. It's like, we found your website. You know, bless my website's little heart. It's great, but it's not like that. That's not really what's getting a lot of projects for me. It's longer term relationships, um, more than anything else, and just being cool and saying hi and seeing what's going on. Is that's been my approach. You know, I've never really gone to. Um, I've never had a formula for this. It's much more. I have friends that I've talked to for years and years and years, and a lot of times it's like, hey, you're writing something. Like, what are you writing? Can I see the script? Like, can you bring? You know, I'm a huge proponent of bringing composers in as early as possible in the process. And so if you can meet people, but oftentimes they want to be brought in at the very, 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 very end of the process, and it's maddening. Um, and so meeting people and asking what stories they're writing, what are they working on? You know, let me write some musical ideas for that. I mean, a lot of people are usually, if you say, hey, let me write something for you, people are usually not going to say no. It might not work, and that's fine. But finding places where you can sort of make your own opportunities to some extent and let those grow and see then who you meet from that. That's been my biggest, not even trick, but that's just kind of how I've gone about things. Jeff might say something a little different.
No, it's the same. Like 100% of the work I've done has come from people that I already know and the people they know. Like I haven't put up a thing on my website that says I score films. Like let me know. Come find me. You know, it's
Right.
all you know, I mean, I scored my first film back in 2013 when I had no idea what I was doing. I wish I could go back and do that again, but it's from someone who was a fan of Victor and Penny, and they kind of wanted that kind of sound. And so it's all just, you're right, just the network and the people you know.
Yeah. That's such a short answer, but just to kind of move through things. If anybody has specific questions about that, let's hit them at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think the
I love
last.
I love what you
Go
said,
ahead.
Matt. Oh, I mean, kind of putting some of the things that you guys say in the chat. So
Oh,
you guys,
cool.
you know how you can save the chat at the end? You know, there's three little buttons you can save the chat, and that'll save it to your computer. So I've been trying to write down some of the little nuggets that these guys have been saying, so you can keep them if you want to do that. But I love what you said about the work comes from people you know and people they know, and supporting other people's work. Amos, you were talking about going to the film fest, there's
Yeah.
local film clubs. Like supporting other people's work is the best way to bring work back to yourself.
Yeah.
It is.
And also, you know, one of the last thing I'd say is don't wait till you think you're ready.
Oh, that's a great one.
You know, there's nobody know. We don't know what we're doing. I mean, I still sit down with a blank piece of paper or a blank Logic file and don't have a clue what I'm doing most of the time. And it's just a matter of having a relationship and being able to send really crappy versions of a thing to somebody and say, hey, is there anything, like a lot of times I'll make improvisations and that are 15 minutes long, and I'll find like 5 seconds that I like. I'm like, okay, cool, let's start there. Take that concept into working with somebody. I do a lot of times with directors, I'll do what I call a folder phase, which completely with no picture or anything, I'll just write 5 or 6 pieces of music, you know, short things, just ideas, but that are different. send it to them and say, hey, do we like any of these? And if they like one of them, it's like, cool, let's throw those other five away. And like, we'll use that one as the way to go along. And this is not really client, like getting clients, but just as far as working with people and how it can kind of unfold. You're never going to be like, I am ready to do this thing. Like, it's always, if you're wanting to do this, it's much more about just kind of showing up and starting to say hello, have some examples, and see where it goes.
I think that's a great point to move on to our last point, which was library music versus composition
Yeah.
for hire, which we had a question directly leading into that, which was, have you had success with placement of existing compositions versus, work for custom, which is writing to picture, writing to somebody else's. So let's dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start and then Jeff can jump in as however you'd like.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just so we know what we're talking about, library music would be music that's already finished or that's already been written. And
That
then
you've
obviously,
written, that you've
yes, that
written.
I've written. Yes, that I've written. Um, and then like real, like, to picture is going to be a new thing completely for the picture. And I think when you're first starting out, you're going to end up wanting to write more to picture. However, I do think having a library of music is a great start. And also too, it's a good way to build up and sort of showcase what you can do. And really, I go about it in both ways. I mean, I'm not going to get into it right now, but I actually have a whole thing I'm going out next week to Sundance to launch that is a new kind of music licensing library. Um, and that will filmmakers will pull from pre-existing music that I've made in a very specific way that I'm not going to get into right now because it's another hour long Zoom at least. But the library music I think is it's a good place to start. It's great. What I love about the library stuff, it's like, here you go, it's done. Thank you for the money. Bye. I mean, it's kind of the most ideal transaction a lot of the times. And there's going to be, you never know what directors are going to like. A lot of times I've written whole new pieces of music for things and they actually end up wanting to license something off of one of my albums. So there's really, there's no one answer to it. There are definitely different kinds of things. And the way you work with and talk about library music is different than composition, because composition, you're talking about, how do we support this scene? How do we write a new thing? How do we build the wall and paint it, instead of just, well, the wall's built, so let's paint it with some old thing we already have.
One
That
thing I'll
doesn't feel
add.
like a great answer though.
Yeah,
So go ahead, Jeff, please. Anything.
I'll just add. I mean, I think both of us really, I'm still really working on trying to get placements. I mean, most of my work has come from just film scoring, but I think there's a huge world of placement. A lot of people make full-time good money doing it. I will say this: if you're going to get into placement and library music, you've got to have a decent amount of pieces, and you want to kind of organize them by style, by genre, by feel. And also, like, let's say you've written a 2.5 minute piece of music. You're going to want to be able to supply a 90-second version, a 60-second version, and a 30-second version, and possibly a 15-second version, and also what's called stems, which means, let's say it's a tune with bass, drums, keyboards, and vocals. Like, you're going to want to supply a version without vocals. You're going to want to supply a version of just the bass, just the drum. I mean, it's gobs and gobs of work, but anyone who's going to want to use that music especially for commercials, they're going to need all of that stuff. But if that hits, it's going to make all of that worth it, because there's going to be a licensing fee up front, which you'll probably split 50-50 with whoever's helping you license it, like a music house. And then there'll be royalties on the back end, which is another thing we just don't have time to talk about all this. But I'm also Erin, I think, will send some other resources that we can direct you guys to that'll answer a lot of these questions as well.
We have about 5 minutes left. This has been so interesting. I think I just got more questions than I started with. But is there anything else that we haven't answered that anyone else would like to ask at this point? And then I have a question for all of you. We'll send a follow-up email with some resources, and there'll be a short survey on there that will ask you, was this useful? Would you like to see some more things like this? Heartland Song Network is dedicated to providing this information, and that's what we do. That's not for profit. So if this is valuable, we can do another one, and we can go deeper dive. We didn't even get into PROs. We didn't get into any, we could go any one of these sections a little bit deeper if you guys felt that that was useful. So you can tell me that when I send you the survey. Yes, please send resources and how to get music in these magical libraries. Yeah, that's the $60,000 question, isn't it? Is there anything else that anybody's got that we haven't covered that you'd like to ask these gentlemen that are so nice to give us their time right now? You're welcome, Jody. Good. I'm glad, Luke, I'm glad you found this helpful.
Someone asked about my MacBook. Like, it's just like it's a old M1 MacBook. It's like the first generation M1. I love it. It's great. It's like 3 pieces of paper thick. And then I have an iMac that's like my main workhorse. So there's, also too, like I'd like to quickly mention, there's like the tools. There's no right set of tools. There's some things that are helpful, but you can get by with anything you have already. You probably can get started with it. I'm never a fan of you've got to go get blah 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 blah.
Yeah, that's the old thing. It's like, will this guitar make me a better player? Because if I buy a more expensive guitar,
Right.
does it
Not
make me a
really.
better player?
You
I
can
wish
enjoy
it
it more,
worked like
maybe.
that. That would be great.
Right. I feel
Someone
the
did-
exact same way about this stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, someone did also ask about lyrics. Everything we heard today was all instrumental. Jeff, I know you work with lyrics. I don't know, Amos, if you do as well, but Jeff, you want to start there?
Yeah, well, just because we played instrumental stuff, like, I mean, everything is in play. Everything is in play. In fact, a lot of commercial music, they love lyrics and they want tunes and they want catchy things and they want one of the biggest selling themes is home right now. Like people want songs about home or being at home and things like that. So they want those lyrical tunes. So that's and I've just, my work with lyrics has been usually with Erin. So, and we have some of our Victor and Penny stuff is available for licensing in that realm. But yeah, lyrics are super important and are definitely in play.
Yeah, and it's contextual, right? So we had a song, had a song that was used for, we've been on two radio programs. One of was an early morning one, and they used "Wake Up Early" was the name of the song, and they had a 6 a.m. show. So, it's contextual. Just it's hard to plan for that, I think.
One music supervisor once told me that, like, we think about like, oh, I want to find an agent to find places for my songs, and like his job is to find a song for the place, not a place for the song. So
wow.
that's what we're up against in a way, so the more stuff you have and the more varied you can be, the better chance you have.
This is all really helpful. Any last words from you, Amos?
Not really. I mean, if this is something you're curious about, just make some stuff. There's no. I think you can come up with a scene and come up with a scenario in your head and write some music for it. You don't have to wait for a thing to happen to at least get started on some ideas in whatever the realms are. You just kind of find out what your voice is, what you like, what sounds do you like together. And if you're a musician, a more traditional musician, I mean, to sort of speak to the lyric thing, like, what do your songs sound like without lyrics? And how would you fill that gap? If you feel like there's a gap, if there's no lyrics, like, what would you add to it that would fill out that song? That's just sort of an interesting prompt and idea. Again, I don't really work with lyrics at all. Occasionally I have, but for the most part, it's all instrumental. Even my own music, I don't have lyrics. Like my Amos music is all instrumental music.
All right. Well, we are right at 1 o'clock, and I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you so much. Again, if you want to save the chat, there's a lot of great stuff. There's 3 little dots at the bottom of your chat. If you click on it, you'll see Save Chat. That'll save it right down to your hard drive. I'm going to follow up with an email to thank you all for coming, give you some more resources, and a very short, just 6 or 7 question survey. And if you would like to see more of this, please let us know, because Heartland Song Network is here for you. Look us up online and you can find out more about us. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to Amos and Jeff.
Thank you
Wonderful.
all.
Well, thanks guys. It was great to chat.
All right. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much.